where we left off, only covering one judge this evening. In the way of a quick review, first couple of chapters of Judges introduces us to a great sin of Israel. They did not clear out the promised land like they were supposed to. And, a casual reading of that, you can look at that and you go, okay, I knew God was mean and wrathful and he wants people dead. But if you read a little deeper, you find out God knew that their hearts would stray as a result and that they would turn from him. They would begin to worship other gods because the other people would influence them. They'd intermarry, and as a result, they'd end up worshiping the Baals, the Asherah, and all kinds of other gods. And so basically, the Lord gave Moses very specific instructions that they did not follow after Moses and Joshua had passed away. In fact, the next generation just kind of forgot, and what God said was going to happen ended up happening. They began to intermarry, and as a result of those intermarriages, they began to worship other gods. So we kind of set the scene of Israel. When we turn to Judges, Israel has moved into the promised land, and for the most part, they control it. But they didn't get rid of everybody, so they didn't completely control it. So from then on out, we see the repeated cycle in Judges that always looks like this. Israel does evil in the sight of the Lord, and so the formula always kind of starts that way. It usually says, again, Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. So that's them turning back to other gods. As a result of that, one of the nations, one of the people groups that they didn't get rid of like they were supposed to, ends up oppressing them. God allows them to be oppressed by the Amalekites or the Ammonites or the Edomites. They come in and they take over, and we saw with Gideon, it was the Midianites. They were like locusts. They were just everywhere. Third, as a result of that oppression, Israel realizes what they've done, and they cry out to God and say, "Oh God, help us. We won't do it again, we promise." And that God relents, and he raises up a deliverer that we call a judge. Raises up a judge to lead the people and overcome that oppression. So step 5, the oppression is subdued because of that judge. And then 6, Israel lives at peace for a certain amount of time. And so we've seen that multiple times. We've seen what we call major judges that completely follow this cycle, and we've seen minor judges where we just find out, okay, they probably did the same kind of thing in there. We just don't have a lot of stories. And so we've covered five major judges and 6 minor judges. And so really we only have one left tonight, and that is possibly the most well-known judge, Samson. It's probably the most well-known story of these judges. So before we jump in to Samson, any comments on the previous 11? I guess the one thing I forgot to say, if you haven't been here, we've kind of talked, this isn't just a cycle, it's a downward spiral. Why did I just get really echoey? Do you guys hear that too? Yeah, that's, can you change that back? Check. Is that better? Yeah, that's better, sort of. So this has been not just a repeated cycle, but a downward spiral in that it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Any comments from you guys on the previous 11? Yeah, Judy.
Well, one thing that struck me is that God was so patient with them still. Every time this happened, they would rise up and have their oppressor subdued, and then they lived in peace for like 80 years, 40 years, that they never learned.
They never learned. Yeah, a lot of times when you live in peace, you come to assume peace. You come to just take it for granted and just think, okay, we can do whatever we want. And we've always been at peace. Nobody can touch us. And then that's when they fell back into sin every time. Yeah, God would always be there for them. Patrick, I'm still hearing a significant echo behind me. If that's possible to, yeah. Anybody else comments on the first 11 judges, either the minor judges or the major judges? You have a favorite so far? Because you probably won't after tonight.
Hypothetical question. The Holy Spirit is not actually living within these individual people, living in maybe sometimes in the judges and others. But do you think it would make a difference
I mean, Jenny and I, she's down at a tennis match, and we were just talking about that. She listened to some podcast on Samson today and was all armed and ready, but the tennis match is going longer. So, but one of the things we talked about, what is that Spirit of the Lord in the Old Testament? Is that the same as the Holy Spirit that we see descend upon all believers, and it's just a special application to those that God has empowered? Or is that something else? Is it just the power of the Lord? Is it Spirit used metaphorically or literally? It is, yeah. It's hard to answer that, and it would be, because we're going to have a couple of difficult spots with that in Samson tonight. It could be both, yeah. And that's it. That's what I told her, is you kind of got to figure out how the author in that book is using it, yeah. Depends on the situation, yeah. All right, well, let's jump in. Judges chapter 13. And the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord gave them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. So we got the beginning of our formula here. Here's the map where we're pretty familiar now with Philistia and those pesky Philistines. They will continue to be a problem even after tonight. That's something we'll talk about at the end. Remind me if I forget. This is the only portion of the cycle now, though, that we read at the beginning. So, Dad, you mind going back to the cycle page? Here in the first verse of 13, we see that Israel has done evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord allows them to be oppressed. But what you're going to miss in this is step 3. It just doesn't happen. And a lot of scholars, a lot of writers said this is how bad things have gotten. It's the downward spiral is so far down now that the people aren't even crying out to the Lord anymore. But what's interesting, God's going to work anyway, isn't he? Even in the midst of that. So I guess all we can say is things have degraded so far that the people no longer even cry out to the Lord for help, because you will not see step 3 in this cycle. You will sort of see step 4. We'll kind of talk about that. All right, let's go back. Oh, yeah, Ruth Ann.
I'm curious what you would say to this, but the years that have gone by, hundreds of years that have gone by, is it because they just didn't tell the generations the stories of old?
I mean, I think it's kind of what Val was saying too, or somebody was, I don't forget who who brought it up, that why does it keep going away? I just have an educational theory that you learn better if you own the question. I don't think those other generations owned the question. Sure, Grandpa, God's great, whatever, and until they've experienced it, they just take it for granted. They take peace for granted. They assume that that God is, like you guys said, is always going to be there for them. So I don't. Maybe it was that generation didn't tell them, but they didn't instruct them. Guys, I think we see this in our own cycles right now in America. I know my generation is incredibly spoiled. We've had it pretty easy. And so you start to take things for the Lord's blessing for granted. Yeah, good question, though. Why does this keep happening is a good question. And the other answer is human nature. All right, so in spite of the people's apathy, God is now going to raise up a judge. Let's look at the beginning of this story, verse 2. There was a certain man of Zorah, of the tribe of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and had no children. And the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, "Behold, you are barren and have not borne children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Therefore be careful and drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean. For behold, you shall conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come upon his head. For the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to save Israel from the hand of the Philistines." I want to point that out there. Did anybody notice what it said? Begin, right? That's kind of important for the end of the story. God's prophecy did not come true. Did not come true is what I wanted to say, but you know what I mean. It's going to happen exactly how he says. Verse 6, then the woman came and told her husband, "A man of God came to me, and his appearance was like the appearance of the angel of God, very awesome. I did not ask him where he was from, and he did not tell me his name, but he said to me, 'Behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. So then drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb to the day of his death.'" And so this is interesting. This is the first time this has happened in Judges. We've got something kind of special going on here. We have an angelic announcement. Does this announcement remind you of anything? What's it remind you of? It sounds a lot like the announcement of Jesus, doesn't it? You could also go back to Abraham and Isaac or John the Baptist. It kind of sounds like this special birth announcement from an angel. Yeah.
I heard a sermon not too long ago that pointed out the number of women who were barren that God used to deliver.
Yeah, how many was it? How many barren women?
Almost all of them you read about.
Yeah, it seems like it. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, Richard. Well, it does, yeah, and especially Manoah will respond a lot like Gideon here. So yeah, it will remind us of Gideon, but for Gideon, it wasn't a birth announcement. This just reminds us of it's like we're doing a Christmas sermon here. She's also told that he will be a Nazarite, and so a Nazarite vow you can read about if you want to in Numbers chapter 6. I think it's like the first 11 verses or so. Now, it's a little different. He's not taking the vow, is he? And so it's not a promise that he's making. He's not swearing upon it, but it is being sworn upon him. It's being announced that this shall be the conditions for your son. And so I did read a couple of scholars that say that said it was only wine during pregnancy, but I think the fact that he was supposed to be a Nazarite meant that he's not supposed to drink wine. Which is one of the requirements of a Nazarite. The other two, you guys remember, we'll just play a little game. You guys know. What are the other two requirements of a Nazarite? You don't cut your hair. That may come into play later. What's the third one? Eat nothing unclean. Let's expand that just a little. Specifically, it's not to touch a corpse. Because the Jewish people were already told, don't eat anything unclean. And so just being Jewish, that you were subject to that law. But Nazarite took it a little further, and you can't touch a corpse. So 3 prohibitions: wine, intoxicating drink, and then it kind of gets expanded to anything from the vine. You can't cut your hair, and no touching corpses. Spoiler alert, this judge is not going to be great at keeping this assignment. Clearly, though, this man will still be set apart, so much so that his father worries about how to exactly do this. Let's look at his father's response here. Then Manoah prayed to the Lord and said, "O Lord, please let that man of God whom you sent come again to us and teach us, what are we to do with the child who will be born?" And God listened to the voice of Manoah, and the angel of God came again to the woman as she sat in the field. But Manoah, her husband, was not with her. So the woman ran quickly and told her husband, "Behold, the man who came to me the other day has appeared to me." And Manoah arose and went after his wife and came to the man and said to him, "Are you the man who spoke with this woman?" And he said, "I am." And Manoah said, "Now when your words come true, what is to be the child's manner of life, and what is his mission?" And the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, "Of all that I said to the woman, let her be careful. She may not eat of anything that comes from the vine, neither let her drink wine or strong drink, or eat any unclean thing. All that I commanded her, let her observe." Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, "Please let us detain you and prepare a young goat for you." And the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, "If you detain me, I will not eat of your food, but if you prepare a burnt offering, then offer it to the Lord." For Manoah did not know that he was the angel of the Lord. And Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, "What is your name, so that when your words come true, we may honor you?" And the angel of the Lord said to him, "Why do you ask my name? Seeing it is wonderful." That kind of means mysterious in Hebrew. You see that this is all awesome and mysterious. Verse 19, so Manoah took the young goat with a grain offering and offered it on the rock to the Lord, to the one who works wonders. And Manoah and his wife were watching. And when the flames went up toward heaven from the altar, the angel of the Lord went up in the flame of the altar. Now Manoah and his wife were watching, and they fell on their faces to the ground. The angel of the Lord appeared no more to Manoah and his wife. Then Manoah knew that he was the angel of the Lord. And Manoah said to his wife, "We shall surely die, for we have seen God." But his wife said to him, "If the Lord had meant to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering at our hands, or shown us all these things, or now announced to us such things as these." And the woman bore a son and called his name Samson. And the young man grew, and the Lord blessed him. And the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him in Dan between Zorah and Eshtaol. So that's the response. They have this angel of the Lord visit. I know you guys are going to ask, is it the pre-incarnate Christ? I don't know. That's one of those debates that goes back and forth. Was this an angel like we're used to with angels? Or is this one of those visits? And maybe that's why, if it is the pre-incarnate Christ, maybe that's why Jesus says, "I'm not going to tell you my name. You're just recognizing that this is also wonderful." And he said, "I am." Yeah, there's that. Yeah. I mean, sometimes that doesn't always have to mean I am. That can just mean I am. Yeah, yep, that's me. They also name the baby. Finally, we find out after quite a narrative here already. The baby's name is Samson. And so if we want to fill out our map here, we've got the Philistines down in their area that they've always been in, will continue to be in for a while. And you got Samson that lives between Dan and Judah. He's from the tribe of Dan. And so here we have chapter 13. It's a birth narrative. It's interesting. Like I said, it's reminiscent of Christ. Birth narrative seems to show that God has blessed him from the beginning. And did you see that phrase in verse 25? The Spirit of the Lord began to stir him. And so we got to figure out what to do with that. ESV capitalizes it, and so they're making an interpretive step there and saying that is the Holy Spirit. Does NLT, if anybody else has a Bible open, do most of our translations in verse 25 capitalize Spirit, don't they? And so that's the translators. That's not the case in the Hebrew. There's no capital or anything. And so that's them making an interpretive step saying this is God himself stirring in Samson as a spirit. All right, any questions or comments on his birth narrative there? Again, something new for us. Boy, this kid's going to be something special, right? We haven't got this yet. I mean, Gideon wasn't announced like this. Jephthah wasn't announced like this. This is going to be nice. All right, we fast forward to young adulthood then, Judges chapter 14. Samson went down to Timnah, and at Timnah he saw one of the daughters of the Philistines. Then he came up and told his father and mother, "I saw one of the daughters of the Philistines at Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife." But his father and mother said to him, "Isn't there a woman among the daughters of your relatives or among all our people that you must go take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines?" But Samson said to his father, "Get her for me, for she is right in my eyes." That was a pickup line then. You are right in my eyes. So his mother and father have an excellent point here, don't they? What was one of the reasons God wanted them to get rid of all these other peoples in the promised land? What was he worried about? Intermarriage. And that's exactly what Samson's proposing. And so now we have who we presume, because he's in here, he's going to be a judge. He's going to be raised up by God, choosing this very thing to do, the very thing God didn't want them to do and they were commanded against. And so he's forbid them from doing this in the first place. And furthermore, it's his enemy. It's his oppressor currently. I mean, they had been oppressing Israel at this point for 40 years. And he says, "I want to marry one of them." And so he doesn't listen to their advice. They push back, and he says that phrase, "She is right in my eyes." Does it remind you of another phrase? I'm going to fast forward to the end of Judges. You don't have to turn there, but the last words of Judges are what? "And everyone did what was right in their own eyes." It's that same phrase. Samson said, "Mom, Dad, I don't care what you think. I don't care what God thinks. She looks fine to me. Seems all right to me." And so she is right in my eyes is not just, man, she's attractive. It's this whole situation seems fine. What are you worried about, Mom and Dad? And so you can almost see the the slippery slope that Israel has been on here, right? With Samson himself. He's saying, I want to marry a Philistine. And so all of the following events, I would note, are because of Samson's failure to listen to his parents or God's plan at this point. Everything devolves here. And I think we can agree that this is not a good move on his part, right? Does everybody agree with that? Because we get a very interesting note in the next verse. What'd you say, Val?
I'm just going to say, not listening to your parents, still pretty contemporary.
Yeah, not listening to your parents. Yeah, it's always been an issue. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so he's failed to honor his mother and father. He's broken God's command not to intermarry with these people groups. And so I think we would all agree, not a good move, seems sinful, seems arrogant, seems very immature. But that's where we hit verse 4, and this is really weird, and I'm anxious to hear what you guys think. His father and mother did not know that it was from the Lord, for he was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines. At that time, the Philistines ruled over Israel. So, I mean, we got to wrestle with this a little bit. The author of Judges here seems to be saying that, okay, we all know what Samson is doing was wrong, but God was leading him to do it. I mean, I can't go there. A lot of the evangelical scholars that I read on this it was hotly debated, but we know it's sinful behavior, and we know God is not making Samson sin. So then how do we make sense of this? It must mean that God is still going to use it for God's glory and their good. That God is working even in the midst of Samson's rebellion. Can God do that? I think he can. I don't like it. And I mean, he's going to work in spite of Samson. He's going to at least begin this pushback and pushing back on that. Did God know Samson would do this? And yet the Spirit was still stirring in him early on. It's an interesting, just interwoven mess of questions. Yeah, Richard.
Philistines had domination over them at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. Philistines had complete...
Someone like that could physically deliver them from
Right, but
start revolution against
Yep, and I would argue the he in this, for he was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines, I think it's referring to God. Because God is going to use Samson against the Philistines, despite, we would all agree, what he's doing is sinful. It is interesting. Just hold on to that what do we do with that? I mean, we definitely don't pursue sin as a result. God doesn't lead us into sin, but can God work in the midst of our rebellion? It seems like he's going to. Any other thoughts on that before I move on? That's another one Jenny and I were arguing down there. She's probably gonna listen to this later and then come argue with me. It can go deep because, I mean, there's some philosophical implications there. That we know God can't orchestrate evil, and we're pretty sure what Samson's doing is a rejection of God's, word. Judy, then Dan.
My commentary says that the Philistines were not one of the 7 nations that they told specifically.
That is true. But they're still a border nation, and they're still not supposed to intermarry. Technically, the Philistines weren't ones that they neglected to drive out. They were gonna stay, but they still weren't supposed to intermarry with the border nations either. It's not just the ones who lived in their midst. They shouldn't have been intermarrying with any of them because they had other gods too. I mean, the same applied to Egypt. They weren't told to exterminate Egypt, but they were told don't marry. Yeah, Dan.
As we learn more about who God is through reading these stories, we realize that God's ways are above ours.
Oh, so far beyond. Yeah.
The more we dig, we realize, wait a minute, God knew that. In class, it's kind of ironic. I'm teaching biblical worldview for upperclassmen. The verse that we're focused on today is very similar to Second Thessalonians. It says, "For this reason, God will send upon them a delusion and influence them, so that they will believe what is false." It's talking about the
Yeah.
Antichrist. And you think, and then I was telling the kids, you got to put it in context. And then the next verse says, "In order that they may be judged who did not believe the truth, but took pleasure in wickedness."
Yeah.
And just the context and realizing that God's way.
It is hard. And I'd add to that God hardened Pharaoh's heart and then held him accountable for it. There's all kinds of situations like that where it's like, wait, what?
And to me, it's like, can I trust God when He doesn't meet my box?
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that
Yep.
all things work together for good.
Yep. Good application. Good. So his parents do not like his choice of marriage, but they agree to arrange it anyway. On the way there, we witness Samson's first incredible feat of strength. Verse 5. Then Samson went down with his father and mother to Timnah, and they came to the vineyards of Timnah, and behold, a young lion came toward him, roaring. Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and although he had nothing in his hand, he tore the lion in pieces as one tears a young goat. Apparently that's easy, I don't know. But he did not tell his father or his mother what he had done. Then he went down and talked with the woman, and she was right in Samson's eyes. I felt like reading that, and she was right in Samson's eyes. So the young lady and her family agree to the marriage. Once they get down there, travels back home for a time, and then he returns again in verse 8. After some days, he returned to take her, and he turned aside to see the carcass of that lion, and behold, there was a swarm of bees in the body of the lion and honey. He scraped it out into his hands and went on eating as he went. And he came to his father and mother and gave some to them, and they ate. But he did not tell them that he had scraped the honey from the carcass of the lion. Wonder why? Yeah, didn't want to get in trouble. Well, I mean, yeah. First of all, why didn't he tell mom and dad? Because he just made them ceremonially unclean. Well, that was Samson's rules, but the other rule for them was you can't eat food from a carcass. Yeah. So anyway, the lion. First of all, let's look at the first scene. An incredible display of strength which God had blessed Samson, right? I mean, you caught what happened. He caught this lion with bare hands and he ripped him. I mean, that's violent and kind of awesome. That's just, I don't know if you've ever been to the zoo and saw a lion, but it's incredible. I think, just tore him asunder. So what God had blessed Samson with in his strength, though, now in the very next paragraph, we see become a stumbling block for Samson. I don't know if he was checking up on this lion, if he sought it out to see, hey, I wonder if that thing's still here. But he saw it again, and now he has broken his Nazirite status, at least one of them, right? Food from a corpse was considered incredibly unclean. Again, for any Jew, that would have required an 8-day ritual of purification, according to Numbers chapter 6, for a Nazirite. So he's touched this corpse. He has to go through this purification rite and go to the priest. And do you see him do any of that? No steps whatsoever. He doesn't seem to care. And that's probably also why he's not telling mom and dad. Not only have I made you guys unclean and I gave you honey out of a lion carcass, I've broken my Nazirite, requirements. He doesn't share it with him and doesn't seem to care. Now, there's also the possibility, I thought about this today and I tried to find somebody that said that, but it was too late when I thought of it. Because we're looking at his Nazirite requirements, right? We've got one ticked off. He touched the corpse. Done. The other one we have to wrestle with is, at some point, does he eat fruit of the vine or partake in fruit of the vine? Now, it's very possible that he's going to have wine later, but it never directly says that. So another possibility is that where would these bees have landed to generate this honey? Part of this might be the fact that, in an indirect way, this honey has come from the vine. That's possible, could be another idea. But let's look at the wedding day. Certainly that would have included wine or other strong drink. And we're never directly told that Samson partakes, but many, and I would even say most, and this is kind of important to the story later, have assumed that he did partake based on his nonchalant attitude towards this corpse. I think it is a pretty safe inference that he didn't, if he didn't care that much about that, even enough to tell his mom and dad or go through this purification ritual, that he probably partook with the Philistines and drank. Or maybe the honey was. I think either way, we've probably seen him break 2 out of 3 in this scene. Again, one of them is we're just kind of assuming. So at the wedding feast now, he's hanging out with all these Philistines, and he ends up getting into a heated argument with them and his very, very new bride. Verse 10. His father went down to the woman, and Samson prepared a feast there. So the young men used to do. And as soon as the people saw him, they brought 30 companions to be with him. And Samson said to them, "Let me now put a riddle to you. If you can tell me what it is within the 7 days of this feast and find it out, then I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes. But if you cannot tell me what it is, then you shall give me 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes." And they said to him, "All right, put your riddle that we may hear it." And he said to them, "Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet." In 3 days they could not solve the riddle. Anybody got it yet? You're good. On the 4th day they said to Samson's wife, "Entice your husband to tell us what the riddle is, lest we burn you and your father's house with fire. Have you invited us here to impoverish us?" Like, hey, thanks a lot for inviting us to this wedding. Now we're going to have to give up our bet here. Samson's wife wept over him and said, "You only hate me. You do not love me. You have put a riddle to my people, and you have not told me what it is." And he said to her, "Behold, I've not even told my father nor my mother, and shall I tell you?" She wept before him the 7 days that their feast lasted, and on the 7th day he told her, because she pressed him hard. Then she told the riddle to her people, and the men of the city said to him on the 7th day, before the sun went down, "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" And he said to them, "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have..." By the way, guys, that's what every woman wants to be called. That's a heck of a pet name right there. Yeah, now a side note on that, there is a little play on that too, is, we see that as just an incredible insult, but heifers a female cow did not plow. That was not what they were there for. And so what he's basically saying is, what you've done is unfair. This wasn't part of the rules. So he's not insulting his wife, he's just saying what they did was very unfair. Anyway, back to the heifer. "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have found out my riddle." And the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and he went down to Ashkelon and struck down 30 men of the town and took their spoil and gave the garments to those who had told the riddle. In hot anger, he went back to his father's house, and Samson's wife was given to his companion who had been his best man. We'll come back to that in a second. Strange story, right? Weird story. Judges is just full of weird stories. I would say this is a story of impetuous anger. He poses this riddle to him, ends up telling his wife tells them, and he goes off, and it demonstrates Samson's immaturity. As a result of losing his little wager, he said, "Okay, I got to give you 30 garments. I'm going to go kill 30 of your people." Ashkelon was a Philistine city, and so he went and he killed 30 of their people, took off their clothes, and said, here's your bet. Thanks for cheating." I mean, there was something very immature about this. There's something very impetuous. Now, some of you are going, "Yeah, he got him," but further, it didn't exactly put his marriage in good standing, right? And his animosity with the Philistines is going to grow because of this. His new wife was given to another. We'll find out why in the next paragraph, which presumably it was a Philistine, which I don't know. I'm speculating here, but it seems like it's implying that his best man was a Philistine. I find that interesting. I think that's very possible because that's all you see him hanging out with. He hates these people, and yet those are the only scenes we get. He's interacting with them, he's drinking with them, he's feasting with them, he's posing them riddles. You never see him interact with his people, which is interesting. Probably. Hey, we tried to tell you. Yeah, absolutely. So Samson's wife has been given away, but he doesn't know that yet. Do you think it's going to make him angry? Chapter 15, after some days at the time of the wheat harvest, Samson went to visit his wife with a young goat. And he said, "I will go in to my wife in the chamber." But her father would not allow him to go in. And her father said, I really thought that you utterly hated her, so I gave her to your companion. Well, is not her younger sister more beautiful than she? Please take her instead. It's great, Dad. And Samson said to them, this time I shall be innocent in regard to the Philistines when I do them harm. So what he's saying there is this time, okay, last time that one might have been on me, but this time they deserve it. Verse 4, so Samson went and he caught 300 foxes and he took torches and he turned them tail to tail and put a torch between each pair of tails. And when he had set fire to the torches, he let the foxes go into the standing grain of the Philistines and set fire to the stacked grain and to the standing grain, as well as the olive orchards. Then the Philistines said, who has done this? And they said, Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he has taken his wife and given her to his companion. And the Philistines came up and burned her and her father with fire. You remember when they threatened that earlier? And Samson said to them, if this is what you do, I swear I will be avenged on you. And after that, I will quit. And he struck them hip and thigh with a great blow. And he went down and stayed in the cleft of the rock at Edom. And so Samson sets fire to their fields with basically 150 pairs of foxes. Again, weird story. Don't know. We were kind of talking about that either yesterday or today. It's like, how did that work? Did he just tie them together? Did he like knock them out? And because can you imagine trying... Whatever. So he is once again, just in case you're keeping track here, he's once again broken God's law. A fire like this, according to Mosaic law, would have required restitution. Clearly, he said it. He said if a field of grain sets on fire, you are to pay them back. And do you see him wanting to do anything like that? Now, granted, they're not fellow Israelites. But still, you do not see a God-like heart here. But it says that the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. So again, we still keep wrestling with this idea. Even Samson's vengeance in general is ungodly. Do you see others in the... again, I know these aren't Israelites, but they're often told God's people depend on God, wait on God, leave the revenge to God. And you don't see him doing that. And so they retaliate by burning his ex-wife and former father-in-law, and he strikes them, and then he runs to hide. They come looking for him and plan to attack Judah, possibly where he hid. We're not real sure where Edom is, but this context kind of gives us a clue that it might have been in the territory of Judah there. Verse 9, then the Philistines came up and encamped in Judah and made a raid on Lehi. And the men of Judah said, why have you come up against us? They said, we've come up to bind Samson, to do with him as he did to us. Then 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cleft of the rock of Edom and said to Samson, do you not know that the Philistines are rulers over us? What then is this that you have done to us? See, this is one of his few interactions with his people, right? And he said to them, as they did to me, so I've done to them. And they said to him, we've come down to bind you that we may give you into the hands of the Philistines. And Samson said to them, swear to me that you will not attack me yourselves. They said to him, no, we'll only bind you and give you into their hands. We will surely not kill you. So they bound him with 2 new ropes and brought him up from the rock. And so incredibly strong ropes, brand new ropes that they've tied around him. They're taking him to the Philistines, and they don't really care what happens to him. Samson's punishment will probably not be very light, but he's still angry. Judah has turned him over to the Philistines basically to prevent an all-out war. Verse 14. When he came to Lehi, the Philistines came shouting to meet him. Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and the ropes that were on his arms became as flax that had caught fire, and his bonds melted off his hands. And he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey and put out his hand and took it. And with it he struck down 1,000 men. And Samson said, with a jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey have I struck down 1,000 men. As soon as he had finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone out of his hand, and that place was called Ramath Lehi. And so, a couple things happening here. He's getting back at him. We see another feat of strength. He broke off these new ropes as if they were nothing, and then grabs jawbone of a donkey. So what does that mean? Touched another corpse. And out of his anger, he takes it out on 1,000 men. There's a quick wordplay here I'll draw your attention to. The Hebrew word for donkey also is the Hebrew word for heap. It's the same word. And so what you see here is kind of a little pun from Samson. And so he's talking about heaps and heaps of these bodies, but it's also the same word as donkey. So it's kind of fun. So now watch what Samson does for the first time that we know of. Verse 18. And he was very thirsty, and he called upon the Lord and said, "You have granted this great salvation by the hand of your servant. And shall I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" And God split open the hollow place that is at Lehi, and water came out from it. And when he drank, his spirit returned, and he revived. Therefore the name of it was called En Hakor. It is at Lehi to this day. And he judged Israel in the days of the Philistines 20 years. And so as far as we know, this appears to be the first time Samson has actually prayed. We've got no other. I'm not saying he never did. I'm just saying in this narrative, it's the first time it's called out that he's cried out to the Lord at all, spoken to the Lord at all. And what is it that he prayed for? Save me from my thirst. Anybody noticing a self-centered pattern here? Notice each time he's saved somebody, who was it that he saved? Himself. Every single time so far. He didn't even save his wife. He's not focused on what God has called him to do. It's very interesting. God provided this water, and then we're confirmed that Samson was indeed a judge, a deliverer. He's fighting back. He's pushing back against the enemies of God, which are the Philistines, and so he seems applauded. It's a very, very interesting story. 20 years pass. Samson is still Samson, chasing after those ladies. Chapter 16. Oh, go ahead, Val.
It just says, you, referring to God, you have accomplished this great victory by the strength of your servant.
Yeah, he's given credit to God there, yep. But the victory was his own salvation. What has every other judge done? They're deliverers. They've saved Israel. Even the minor ones who we don't know much about, what was said about them? That they saved Israel. And then he's thanking God for saving his skin. All right, 20 years pass. Samson is, like I said, still after the ladies. Verse 1. Samson went to Gaza, another area of the Philistines, and there he saw a prostitute, and he went into her. The Gazites were told, "Samson has come here." And they surrounded the place and set an ambush for him all night at the gate of the city. They kept quiet all night, saying, "Let's wait till the light of morning, then we'll kill him." But Samson laid there till midnight, and at midnight he rose and took hold of the doors of the gate of the city and the two posts, and he pulled them up, bar and all, put them on his shoulders, and carried them to the top of the hill that is in front of Hebron. So this is the feat of strength you don't often think about, but he'd gotten himself out of trouble again. They thought they had him, and they said, "Hey guys, let's just rest up till morning, and at morning light, we're going to wait outside the gates. When we open the gates, he'll come out." He just left at midnight and just removed the gates himself. But once again, who did he save? Himself. Now we fast forward to yet another woman. Should we presume that she's also a Philistine? We can argue about that if you'd like. Since so far he's kind of demonstrated a type, hasn't he? He kind of gravitates towards the Philistine women. But that is an assumption. We're never told that Delilah is a Philistine. She clearly helps them, and he has a type, so we kind of assume. Verse 4, after this he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. And the lords of the Philistines came up to her and said to her, "Seduce him." It's pretty easy to do to Samson, right? "And see where his great strength lies, and by what means we may overpower him, that we may bind him to humble him. And we will each give you 1,100 pieces of silver." Well, she couldn't pass that up. So Delilah said to Samson, "Please tell me where your great strength lies and how you might be bound, that one could subdue you. So another reason there to assume Delilah was a Philistine is this almost immediate betrayal. There was no loyalty there at all. And so she's going to try to get the secret of his strength, but Samson's going to mess with her multiple times before finally giving in. Let's take a look at this whole scene here. Verse 7. Samson said to her, "If they bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, then I shall become weak and be like any other man." Then the lords of the Philistines brought up to her 7 fresh bowstrings that had not been dried, and she bound him with them. Now she had men lying in ambush in an inner chamber. And she said to him, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." But he snapped the bowstrings, as a thread of flax snaps when it touches the fire. So the secret of his strength was not known. Then Delilah said to Samson, "Behold, you've mocked me and told me lies. Please tell me how you might be bound." And he said to her, "Well, if they bind me with new ropes that have not been used, then I shall become weak and be like any other man." So Delilah took new ropes and bound him with them and said to him, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." And the men lying in ambush were in an inner chamber, but he snapped the ropes off his arms like a thread. Then Delilah said to Samson, "Until now you have mocked me and told me lies. Tell me how you might be bound." And he said to her, "Well, if you weave the 7 locks of my head with the web and fasten it tight with a pin, then I shall become weak and be like every other man." So while he slept, Delilah took the 7 locks of his head and wove them into the web, and she made them tight with a pin and said to him, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." But he awoke from his sleep, pulled away the pin, the loom, and the web. She said to him, "How can you say I love you?" I think he should have some words for her too. "How can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me these 3 times, and you have not told me where your great strength lies." And when she pressed him hard with her words day after day and urged him, his soul was vexed to death. And he told her all his heart and said to her, "A razor has never come upon my head, for I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If my head is shaved, then my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man." And so after 3 lies here, Samson finally tells the truth. Or at least we presume that's what's going to happen. A couple questions I always get every time I read this. Why did she expect the truth from him at any point after what she had done? And why did he keep trusting her? Why did he, after, 3 strikes, you're out, lady, right?
He's just been a really deep sleeper.
A deep sleeper and kind of thick, not the smartest guy in the world. Verse 18, when Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called the lords of the Philistines, saying, "Come up again, for he has finally told me all his heart." Then the lords of the Philistines came up to her and brought the money in their hands. She made him sleep on her knees, and she called a man and had him shave off the 7 locks of his head. Then she began to torment him, and his strength left him. And she said, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." And he awoke from his sleep and said, "I will go out as at other times and shake myself free." But he did not know that the Lord had left him. And the Philistines seized him and gouged out his eyes and brought him down to Gaza and bound him with bronze shackles. And he ground at the mill in the prison. But the hair of his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. So after multiple feats of strength throughout this story, we see Samson finally humbled. He could not break free. He could not fight back. He could not dominate the opposition like he had been doing. Why not? The Lord took away his strength, right. The wrong answer is his hair got shaved, right? Where was the strength? Was it in his hair? No, it was in his covenant with the Lord. And it had finally been broken beyond repair in this case. And so the Lord removed his strength. And so, we're assuming then that the hair was the last part of that Nazirite vow. And it is interesting that because he had broken the other parts, you get to this part, and now as soon as they shave his head, it's almost like the covenant, the vow. I have trouble calling it a vow because he didn't make it. That status as a Nazirite is gone. As a result of his repeated unfaithfulness to God's plan, he becomes a clown for the Philistines to laugh at. Verse 23, let's close this out. Now the lords of the Philistines gathered to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to rejoice. And they said, "Our God has given Samson, our enemy, into our hand." And when the people saw him, they praised their God. For they said, "Our God has given our enemy into our hand, the ravager of our country, who has killed many of us." And when their hearts were merry, they said, "Call Samson, that he may entertain us." So they called Samson out of the prison, and he entertained them. They made him stand between the pillars. Samson said to the young man who held him by the hand, "Let me feel the pillars." Remember, he couldn't see at this point. "On which the house rests, that I may lean against them." Now the house was full of men and women. All the lords of the Philistines were there. And on the roof there were about 3,000 men and women who looked on while Samson entertained. So Samson has this moment of clarity finally and asks for strength once more. Verse 28, then Samson called to the Lord and said, "O Lord God, please remember me and please strengthen me only this once, O God, that I may be avenged on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." And Samson grasped the 2 middle pillars on which the house rested, and he leaned his weight against them, his right hand on the one and his left hand on the other. And Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." Then he bowed with all his strength, and the house fell upon the lords and upon all the people who were in it. So the dead whom he killed at his death were more than those whom he had killed during his life. Then his brothers and all his family came down and took him and brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Ashtaol in the tomb of Manoah his father. He had judged Israel 20 years. And so, I mean, again, interesting story you guys are familiar with. Even in the end, did you see why Samson wanted strength one more time? Want to avenge my eyes. It's not use me to save your people, Lord. It's not, I mean, it's still a very imperfect deliverer here. But yet he's called a judge once again. And in this, Samson demonstrates incredible faith. How do we know that? Why am I confident in saying Samson in this act demonstrated faith?
He gave his life.
He gave his life, but there's more. Shows up in the New Testament. Where do you think it shows up? Hebrews chapter 11, faith chapter, verse 23, uses Samson as an example of faith. So Samson was blessed by the Lord, began a revolution against the Philistines, but wow, what a tragic figure. I mean, it's hard making heads or tails out of this one. God blessed him, God seemed to work through him, but my goodness, his heart was not drawn to the Lord. It was often drawn against him. It's just an interesting story. Let me hit a few so whats, and then we'll see if you have anything to add. I think this is the big lesson of Samson. Too much faith in our own strength leads to arrogance and actually becomes a curse. I think ultimately that's kind of where Samson had got. I can take care of this. I got this. You seen what I can do with the jawbone of a donkey? See what I can do to a lion? You know, there's just so much arrogance there in his own strength. And I think that applies to us still today. In our strength, in our finances, our ability to earn finances, in our intelligence, in our religiosity. There's so many things. If we're arrogant in our own strength, something that God maybe even has given us as a strength becomes a curse. Because it's where we have put our faith. I mean, I know we can't imagine alternatives, and that's where the philosophical part of this comes in, but man, it'd be interesting to read an alternative story where Samson honored God in everything he did with his strength, praised him for that gift that he'd been given, but that's not Samson then, right? Second thing that I saw is God can still use horrible human beings. I push back on me if you want, but it's not a guy I want to hang out with. He just didn't, God still used him to begin this revolution against the Philistines who will end up ending. Ultimately, it's Samuel that ends it, right? In the book of Samuel. And then finally, we see once again a foreshadowing of Christ. There's a lot of imagery here from all the way at the back at the beginning. There's a birth narrative, just like the birth narrative of Christ. And did you notice how he died? I mean, with his arms outstretched and sacrificing himself to defeat the enemy. But what's the big difference? You've got an incredibly imperfect model of this contrasted with the absolute perfection of Christ. It's really an interesting one to wrestle with, and we once again come back to where we've come back to in Judges all the time. Judges is just this longing for the perfect deliverer. All of these deliverers are imperfect, and it gets worse and worse and worse, and Samson is the bottom of the barrel. And we're still just longing for God to deliver once and for all. And so you see these foreshadowings of Christ even in an imperfect judge, imperfect deliverer. Anything you would add? Anything you take away?
Question, what did you say probably 4 weeks ago? Strength is humility, or humility is strength in one of your messages.
Sounds good.
The conclusion of one of your messages
Sounds biblical, yeah.
really hit home.
Well, God certainly works in our weaknesses. You see that, then you turn the pages into the New Testament, and it seems like that's where he works in us. It's never in our strengths, so that we don't, unless we're humble in our strengths. Right. Yeah, and I think that's the humility you're referencing. Anything else you'd add? Interesting that we always tell this one in Sunday school, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a little different.
It's a different one. One more question then is what Val posed to us last week when we left. You remember what you asked? You wanted us all to think about it.
Yeah, was he a good guy?
No, you said, was he a hero? I think I mean, the jury's already concluded on was he a good guy. I think we could, not a lot of folks would say he was, but is he a hero? I would say yes. Very imperfect hero.
Very end, for sure.
At the very end, yes, absolutely. But yeah, I thought that was a good way to pose it. Is Samson really a hero? He's presented as such. All right, thank you guys. Let's pray. God, thank you once again through a lot of scripture. Just one story of a quick biographical study of a man who seems as imperfect as you can get. But God, woe to us if our attitude is saying, we're so much better than Samson. I think the message is we are Samson. We are in desperate need of a perfect deliverer because our strength is failing. Our strength cannot save us. And if we continually put our trust in that, the strength that you've given us will become a curse. Help us to not be arrogant in our own power, in our own abilities, but to always be looking to you, God. And help us to humble ourselves. And God, once again, we just thank you for the perfect judge, the perfect deliverer, and what he did for us, what we celebrated this last Sunday, Friday through Sunday. The sacrifice, but then he didn't stay dead. His brothers didn't come and bury him in his father's grave. Instead, the grave was empty. And so we know death has been defeated and by this ultimate deliverer. And it's in his name we pray these things. Amen. All right, God bless. And the intention is to wrap it up next week. We'll see.